This is episode 347 of the Super League Pod. We've got the whole world of Rugby League covered this week as hosts join up from both hemispheres to cover everything from Super League to State of Origin to Halton Hornets Under 13s and plenty in between. We have a guest host this week, so you get to hear some different takes on the greatest game. We get a heat check on what it's like to be a Wire fan right now, briefly board the Abbas Express, and have a quiz specifically for all you Eels fans out there. So strap in, it's SLP time. Hello, listeners. Welcome along to episode 347 of the Super League Pod. You have myself, Mark, this week, Wigan fan Mark, and I'm joined by one of our special guest hosts for this year on the Super League Pod, and it is our hypothetical Rugby League friend, David. David, welcome back to SLP.
Hey, Mark. Great to be here. Shivering, sitting in a small car with a light on.
Yeah, it's quite early in the morning for David, so he's sat outside so he doesn't wake his family. Or maybe at some point in the recording you'll be allowed to go inside. We'll see where we get to. But it's great to have you on. You won the spinning wheel for guest host duties, but it's I think the timing of it's pretty good with the rep round down under that you'll have experienced over the weekend. That's something that'll be good to talk about, and you'll have had a bit more coverage of that from your end of the world. So that's exciting. I think the first thing for you to do is to do the honours and tell people about our sponsor.
Yes, so Super League Pod is sponsored by Rob's Megastore. Rob's Megastore stocks a wide variety of toys, stationery, arts and craft supplies, arts and crafts ideas, I should say, pet accessories, books, and of course, Rugby League birthday cards. Search for Rob's Megastore on eBay or find the link in the episode blog post on superleaguepod.com. And SLP listeners get to use the code SLP10, that's SLP10 at checkout to get 10% off any orders over £5, or enter SLP discount and give that 10% towards the funding of SLP's running costs instead.
Great stuff. Thanks to Rob's Megastore for its continued support. So what we've got coming up on the show today, with the help of our guest host, we're going to find out a bit more about you first up, David, for anyone who hasn't met you before. Then we're going to recap the latest round of Super League from the Northern Hemisphere with fan reviews on all of the games to help us along with that. And then we'll talk a bit as well in other results about the rep round in your hemisphere down under. David, we'll slip in the news as we go along. We'll pick up some bits of listener feedback as well shortly from recent conversations and stuff. We'll make some guesses. And David, you've prepared a quiz, which I'm very excited about. I'm hoping it's about real things that have happened rather than what you like to do on your own Rugby League podcast, which is talk about things that might have happened differently to how they did.
No, it's definitely about real things, Mark. It's not what would have happened. Otherwise, we'd be here for, I don't know. I mean, normally an episode goes for 2 odd hours, so we could be here all day if we do that. But it's fine.
Well, do you want to recap? Because you've for anyone who hasn't heard your Rugby League story, that's one of the SLP shorts we released in the off season. We also did a short where kind of put in a bit of a show that we did for your podcast. So this is your chance to plug your podcast. But tell the people a little bit about yourself and your Rugby League and podcasting credentials.
Okay. So I am a now grown up young boy who supported the mighty Parramatta Eels in Australia. And always knew there was the English game. Didn't really watch a lot of it as until I was probably 20 or so. Which is a long time ago if you don't know how old I am. Basically, I started watching when our Channel 9 over here were putting on the Game of the Round, early 2000s. It went on for about, 10 years or something. And just always enjoyed it, and always enjoyed a guy called Lee Breers. And I was like, I really love this guy. So I'm going to be a Warrington fan, and that's what I decided to do. And I think I've learned that was probably not the year, and it's never going to be the year. But, that's the kind of way that things happen. I don't know if people know a lot about the NRL and what Parramatta's like, but they can't win. They can get very, very close and not win anything, and so can Warrington. So it feels like I've found the right team for me. And, just on the podcast, I mean, maybe just because of the way that things work, I've ended up, with a podcast where I say, well, what if it had gone the other way? What if Warrington had won that year? What if Parramatta had won that year? But we do everything else. So basically, we pick an event and we think about, well, what if something had slightly changed, or what if a different team had won, and what if a player had gone and signed at a different club, or anything like that. Right down to like, what if the whole competition had changed, the structure and everything. And, sometimes I have guests, sometimes it's just me sitting in a small room. So I feel very familiar sitting in this car. And yeah, we talk about what could have happened, what might have happened, and just have a bit of fun doing that.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't always listen to the ones where it's what could have happened in this season. But when you've got like topics that you dive into, and you get your guests on and stuff like that, I love how like the passion can swing with some people about what might have happened, what might have gone differently. And also the other great thing about some of the series you've done through your podcast, I learned a lot about like the old teams in Australian Rugby League, like the teams that started a lot of these competitions off, and how those competitions were formulated before we have now the NRL that we see all the games and we know all the action from. But the stuff that we didn't know about the history of the game in Australia, I think some of the retrospectives or hypotheticals you've done have covered those bits, which has given me a lot more knowledge about teams that existed that no longer exist and that sort of stuff. So it's really good to listen to. If anyone hasn't listened to it already, do search for it. So it's hypothetic RL, but not hypothetic. Hyperthetic.
No, it's spelt wrong. It's intentionally spelt wrong, but it's spelt wrong. Yes, it's spelt as three different things. It's spelt as hyper, and then thetic, and then RL.
Yeah.
Don't ask me why. This is what it came to me one day, and that was what I went with.
I remember you telling me at the time it was because it was you went hyper rather than hyper because you wanted to like emphasize the sort of fun and silliness and kind of mind rolling along with itself nature of what you came up with. I think that was your justification at the time of the pod.
It was. I don't know whether that's I don't know whether that's a good decision. It makes it harder to find. But either way, and look,
well, there'll be links in the episode blog post anyway this week, and we'll tag in the social media accounts, so people will be able to find your podcast if they obviously already found this one.
Yeah, I just want to say as well, with anyone who's listening, and even any of the normal guests that you have on here, if you ever wanted to, I mean, we know how hard it is to get this connection going, Mark, but if we ever wanted to do episodes, because I would like to do more episodes on the English game, because I do love watching it. So and we've even done one together, Mark. So
we've done two.
We've done two, yeah. We've done at least. Only we did two of them. That's right.
I'm still not ready to do the 2020 grand final, like I say.
Look, I've put a basic rule that I don't really want to do anything for anything too close. Like 2020 is still a bit close. We'll wait a few years for 2020.
I don't know if I'll ever be over it, but we'll see. We'll see. Great stuff. Okay, let's move into some of the bits of feedback we've got from listeners about things that have been going on. So, first of all, Sarah, one of my other normal co-hosts, got in touch to pull me up on something from last week's episode. Sarah said, read Chris Satai's international eligibility. She said the only thing ruling Satai out of the Samoan squad is his nationality. Pretty major one, though. I mean, it doesn't always stop players turning out for countries they weren't, have no actual reason to play for, like when Adrian Morley's brother Chris Morley played for Wales just because no one bothered to fact check, for example. But to be honest, last week when I just have Sau and Satai linked together intrinsically in my mind. I connect the two so much. And I thought alliteration, Samoan. And it turns out Satai is Tongan, not Samoan, unlike Liggy Sau. So, yeah, I ballsed up there on that one. But if he looks hard enough, he might be able to find some heritage.
Oh, well, maybe. Who knows? But, look, I don't know whether the Samoan squad or the Tongan squad, for that matter, maybe don't need him. I will get to it when we see the games. But I mean, he's been playing outstanding. So, I think the Tongans may even, find a bench spot for him or a spot in the squad. But yeah, look, I mean, if Samoa can get all the players that they could possibly get, then they're going to be an incredibly strong squad. So
yeah, especially in the forwards, in the middle forward where Satai would be an option, I suppose. Yeah, I think Satai and Parsi have both got an outside chance of the Tongan squad with the performances they put in. Sort of Satai over the last year and a half, really, and Parsi in particular this year, I think has come on strongly at Saints, played better than I expected him to this season. So yeah, both have an outside chance, I think. But like you say, they are strong squads. Last week as well, we picked up on a bit of a tricky, certainly, topic, and we've had a couple of people get in touch around that tricky topic. The exclusion, people have called it a ban in the media, but it's a sort of temporary exclusion, I suppose, of trans women from international rugby league, and specifically, it does apply to the trans women. It seems the way it's been kind of picked up. But do you want to take us through what Alan Walker said first of all?
Yeah, so Alan Walker said, given the stance taken by some non-contact sports, Rugby League had to follow. Player welfare consideration plus possible lawsuits means it's going to be very difficult to be inclusive now. Women's Rugby League is relatively new to have a lot of data on the effect of weight, power, size, etc. Like all sports, the number of examples of trans women athletes is small, but inclusivity is and has been part of Rugby League's DNA. So it's creativity.
Yeah. And Dr. Bob Phillips said, trans inclusion in sport is really tricky. The anti-trans press have made a great deal of safety and fairness arguments, often based around a biological understanding of sex, which, whilst temptingly fits with our 20th century understanding of life, and most of us grew up in the 20th century, Bob notes, isn't quite how it really is. There is a strong focus on women who were assigned male at birth and very little about men who were assigned female at birth, and there's a spill into transphobia generally. Quoting single studies is problematic. This is why most of his own research is about synthesis of everything available. Cherry-picking science to prove your own point is a classic orator's trick. For instance, taking averages in groups is nearly always pointless. If you take the size 6 black trainers that he's found in his consultant's office, are they one of his male or female colleagues? Who's more likely to crush you when they tackle you, Morgan Eskery or Amy Staveley? Top-level arguments are also generally reduce participation. And while there is considered groups working intensely to provide a fair approach to sport, we need to be careful. So both have provided kind of a rounded view there. Bob has picked up on some of the things that maybe are on the fringes of the discussion and aren't really being discussed in the mainstream. But Alan's pointed out that it's a tricky landscape at the moment because there's not a lot of data, even though there are studies like what Bob talks about, there's not a lot of data out there for people to really examine the impact of these things. Like I said last week, I'm not qualified to talk about this, and I'm really not sure what the outcome is. What I would ask, though, because it's come from the International Rugby League, is this something that's been discussed more at all in Australia around trans athletes playing rugby league? Because I'm not aware of any examples in the UK where this has been discussed as an issue or flagged as a potential issue. I'm certainly not aware of anyone who is aiming for any of the Northern Hemisphere-based World Cup squads, for example. So what's the experience around this been like in Australia recently?
I think it's fairly similar. I don't think there's anything. Look, they might. I did hear something, and I'm not sure if I'm correct or not, if there might have been someone, but I don't think it's that there's a huge amount of trans women or whatever. Unfortunately, I'm old, Mark, so everything I say is probably bigoted and racist. I'm not trying to be, but
yeah, I think there's a tendency, like Bob says, about spilling into general transphobia. Then that's not pointing anything. I find myself sometimes struggling with the concept of gender and things like that. Because it's not something I have ever had problems with myself, so I struggle to